Hi everybody, Reaper here. Back with you to go over the ARRIVECAN testimony, part 4. This is Mihn Doan. This is they had him back in chamber by himself, okay, because he was, I believe, the CBSA CEO. So they believe he lied about his testimony before when he said he didn't know who approved the ArriveCan app, the expenditures and stuff, and all the money. So that's where they're going to put their line of questioning, and they swear him in. They swear him in. I've never seen this done at a hearing before, but it's agreed upon by everybody in the hearing, and they're going to swear this guy in. I'm going to cover that too. It's going to be right in there, so everybody can see it. So anyway, without further ado, let's get this thing going.
Doan with us. Do you have an opening statement, Mr. Doan?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Brock. Just one moment, Mr. Doan.
Before the opening statement, I made inquiries with members of the committee, and given the nature of the finger pointing and the attempts to cast blame on other parties as to who chose GC strategies, and given the RCMP investigation, without suggesting at any point in time that Mr. Doan has attempted to mislead this committee, I think it prudent, sir, to have this witness sworn to tell the truth, or to affirm to tell the truth, whatever mechanism binds his conscience.
Certainly. Thanks, Mr. Brock. I think there have been discussions among all the sides, and I understand we have an agreement for that. I see nods, so we have unanimous consent. So I'll turn things over to our clerk to administer.
Never before done in this hearing, in any of these hearings that I've ever watched. This has never happened ever.
So, Mr. Doan, before we will have to swear you, so you will have to repeat after me. So, you will be like saying, I, your name,
I, Mihn Doan,
do solemnly, sincerely,
do solemnly, sincerely,
and truly affirm and declare
and truly affirm and declare
the taking of any oath
the taking of any oath
is according to my religious belief and lawful.
is according to my religious belief and lawful.
I do also solemnly, sincerely,
I do also solemnly, sincerely,
and truly affirm and declare
and truly affirm and declare
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
on this examination
on this examination
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
I confirm that the witness has been sworn in.
Thank you very much. Mr. Doan, we'll turn things over to you for 5 minutes, please.
Chair. Good afternoon. Since giving my testimony, allegations have been made against me, and I thank the committee for the opportunity to address them and elaborate further. Prior to my appearance on October 24th, it had been 6 months since I left the CBSA. I asked for all my emails from the agency related to the allegations. I received a package, and within that package, I found no exchanges with Christian Firth. Subsequently, and in preparation for today, I requested and was given access to a broader search, which is when I found emails where either I or Mr. Firth were on the distribution list, and I'm providing them today. Given how complicated it is to access emails in a department you no longer work in, I will direct any further requests of this nature to the agency. Early pandemic, FAC contacted CBSA to see if we could build an app to replace a paper form. We had days to pull this together, this proposal, and weeks to launch the first version. I asked my team to explore options. Mr. Macdonald took lead. Within 48 hours, his team and he did a very quick assessment of options that were narrowed down to 2 broad technical approaches. One option was an entirely outsourced solution developed and hosted by Deloitte. The other option involved a combination of public servants and staff augmentation to leverage the existing code, expertise, and our cloud infrastructure. Let me be clear. At no time was the choice presented to me as being between a Deloitte solution and a GC Strategy solution. As was pointed out numerous times, GC Strategies is a staffing agency who provide rapid access to IT professionals. They do not develop solutions. I am submitting to the committee the proposal and emails that I found around the time of these events. You will note that nowhere in either option presented or their associated emails is GC Strategies ever mentioned, nor do I have any recollection of it being raised. The decision I was asked to make was whether to fully outsource the work or to have my team oversee the application development. I had concerns with the fully outsourced solution, handing off full control of a time-sensitive project exclusively to an outside firm, and the fact that our data would be hosted on their IT infrastructure instead of our CBSA cloud. I wanted my team to retain the ability to direct the development and resources. In making this decision, I did not choose or direct the selection of GC Strategies. I chose a strategic direction that met our urgent needs for speed and agility at the time. Importantly, I also did not contact GC Strategies to solicit a proposal. As the CIO, I ruled out the entirely outsourced approach. I stand behind that decision, and I am fully accountable for that decision. I particularly want to address the serious accusation that Mr. Macdonald made that I threatened him during our call. I never threatened him. CBSA was preparing to testify, and nobody knew who initially brought GC Strategies in on ARRIVECAN. I called Ms. Macdonald, who I trusted, to answer this question. During the call, it remained unclear who brought GC Strategies into ARRIVECAN, but we agreed it was not me, and I remember indicating to him that if pressed at committee, I may have to redirect the question to him. To be clear, this was not a threat or intended to be one. It is fact. This committee will call further witnesses as required, and if coming to this committee to answer that question was perceived as a threat by Mr. Macdonald, that was never my intention. I never said I would blame him, nor did I lay blame at his feet at my appearance 1 year later. I still don't know who initially contacted GC Strategies to solicit a proposal. I was in no position to threaten his job or career. He was an ADM peer working in a different department. I have a note written by Mr. Macdonald a day after the call, published on the Globe and Mail on October 4th, stating that I, that is to say me, was not personally familiar with the GC Strategies company, and that the decision to select this vendor was not made by myself, that is to say me. That written statement by Ms. Macdonald is also consistent with what appears to be Bottler's report that the committee quoted on November 7th. I don't have the report, but I heard of allegations that there were, quote, conscious efforts to isolate and control the flow and narrative of information to the Vice President, and that, quote, Vice President Doan doesn't know that we've been communicating back and forth. The past few weeks have deeply affected my professional and personal life, my family, my children, my friends, and my mental and physical health. Today, I will openly answer all questions related to the study, but on the advice of legal counsel, I will not answer unrelated questions about my career or my personal life. Enough harm has been done.
Thank you, Mr. Doan. Mr. Brock, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Doan, for your attendance today and your opening statement. There is, it would be prudent for me, sir, to remind you of a couple of things. I specifically asked that you be sworn for a reason. Even though when witnesses attend at committee, there is a parliamentary privilege that whether people are sworn in or not, it would still be considered a contempt of Parliament to mislead the committee by giving a false statement or false evidence, to refuse unless related to cabinet confidences, to answer any questions, or to fail to produce documents that this committee might require someone to produce. That is generally what happens. I specifically asked that you be sworn, given the swirl of accusations that are flowing around from senior government officials as to who retained GC Strategies. So you were sworn because now this attracts criminal code consideration. I understand you have a lawyer, sir, and that would be very prudent for you to do that. But there are provisions in the criminal code that penalize perjury, deliberately giving misleading evidence, which, if founded, if there's a finding of guilt, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, could land a witness in prison for up to 14 years. So you've got both of those issues to contend with. But I say that not to intimidate. I say that not to concern you. I say that not to force you to clam up and consider your instructions from legal counsel. I say that because, sir, I want to give you a safe place in this committee. There were a lot of accusations hurled at you by Mr. Cameron Macdonald, and I have some serious reservations regarding his truthfulness with respect to those accusations. So this is your opportunity, Mr. Doan, to finally set the record straight. So he, on a number of occasions, has accused you that notwithstanding his position as Director General of Innovation, this particular ARRIVECAN app surely would fall within his mandate as an innovative product. He's accused you of selecting GC strategies. You, on the other hand, sir, when you testified on October the 24th, 2023, not once, but I counted it on 4 different occasions over the course of that 2-hour meeting, questions from numerous members of this committee from all political stripes claimed that you still don't know who ultimately selected GC strategies. And in fact, you even went so far to say you've been trying to find the answer for close to a year. You used references to my team made that decision, but then your team consists of 1,600 employees. That doesn't make sense. Then you narrowed that down to potentially 6 director generals. I narrowed that down to Cameron Macdonald, who's largely responsible for innovation. So we have numerous competing theories as to who chose GC strategies. And I can understand. I think Canadians can understand why no one wants to take ownership. This is a 2-person consulting firm that doesn't produce a product, that doesn't operate out of a brick and mortar entity, largely works out of their basement, and has, over the course of a number of years, but in relation to ARRIVECAN, hit the taxpayer lottery. $9 million for doing nothing other than finding professionals to do the work. It's a pretty good gig. I bet you there are millions of Canadians who would love that opportunity. So I can understand why you and others who've testified don't want to be attached to this particular company who is under police investigation. So I've got about 1.5 minutes, sir. I'm going to have numerous opportunities to question you in the course of 2 hours. But I'm going to give you this opportunity to give me the straight goods. Was Mr. Macdonald lying to this committee as he's accused you of?
Thank you for the chair. The question that I was asked at committee and that I answered truthfully was who picked GC strategies. As I said in my opening statement, I chose a direction to in-house. In there, in the material I found, there's no evidence that that decision was tied to a particular company. I stand behind that decision. That decision allowed us to build ARRIVECAN. That decision allowed us to build over 2.5 years of changes as the pandemic evolved.
There, I got 30 seconds. Please answer the question. Was Mr. Macdonald lying to committee on November the 7th, 2023, when he placed the entire responsibility for that decision to hire GC Strategies at your lap? Or was he telling the truth?
Mr. Macdonald said that I made the decision. I did make a decision, to be clear. I made a decision on a technical direction. Also in evidence, and as posted on the Globe and Mail, in his own handwriting, he writes, I did not make that decision, nor was I even familiar with the company.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Sousa, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to skip over the Liberal. I don't even know what they were. Leading questions, almost like he talked to the witness and said, I'm going to ask you this question, and you know what I mean. Anyway, we'll get on with the Bloc Québécois. He's pretty good, this guy. Asked some pretty good questions. Anyway, on we go.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Doan, in your appearance on the 24th of October, you confirmed that you did not take part in the decision-making process to give GC Strategies a contract, and you said that it was a committee that took that decision. A committee comprised of how many individuals, please? Well, thank you very much for the question. Just to clarify, and as I said in my opening remarks, I made a technical and strategic decision which led to GC Strategies. I'm accountable for that decision. I'm responsible for that decision. Now, you'll see in the documents before you that there are many folks who work day and night over a period of 3 days to bring to the table a proposal to head in one direction or another. How many people, my question is, sir, you referred to a committee. How many people sat on that committee? I don't know. That's my main question. Were there 2, were there 3, or 250,000? I don't recall. I apologise. I'm sorry if I used the word committee. From a governance standpoint, I want to be quite clear here. As you'll see in the documentation, these decisions took place over the course of 1 or 2 days. Question, you took a strategic decision that led to the awarding of this contract that was highly controversial, and you don't know what process led to the awarding of this $9 million contract and how many people were involved. That's tough to believe. You'll see in the documentation that I've submitted, the initial application was in March 2022. 2 days later, there were already 2 options on the table. And then within 1 or 2 days, we had to take a strategic decision as to which direction to take. So you took a strategic direction that you acknowledge you're responsible for. That's a big step. That was taken by a group of individuals, and you're responsible for a decision taken by a group of individuals, but you don't know who they were exactly, and how many of them there were, and how that decision took place exactly. So you have a funny definition of accountability. You'll forgive me for saying that. You'll see in the evidence that all those who are involved in developing proposals with a view to arriving at a technological solution, well, those individuals are listed. I am responsible for the strategic decision that I took, and I stand by that. How many technology experts are there at the CBSA, approximately? Well, when I was vice president, there was between 1,200 and 1,400. So you're looking for a needle in a haystack here. You're saying that you're responsible for a decision that was taken by one of 1,200, 1,400 people at the CBSA. And as parliamentarians, we're to go looking for that needle in the haystack. No, I'm not saying that. You'll see in the evidence that the main individuals who are responsible for researching and developing the decisions, we know who they are, we know their names, we have their email addresses and contact details. Could you please table the names of those individuals before the committee, please, sir? Yes, absolutely. It's in the binder that I have submitted or will submit. Please do so. That brings me to another question, a substantial question. Within CBSA, there seems to be a whole army of individuals who are IT experts, who are highly qualified when it comes to these kinds of matters. Do you think that it's normal? I'm asking for your opinion here. Do you think that it's normal that one should have to deal with an outside firm to select an individual or individuals who would execute a contract? There seems to be an army of people who are specialists in the field within the CBSA. Don't you find that abnormal? If you were to be in our shoes, don't you think that that looks like it would be more intelligent and smart and effective and transparent to act otherwise?
I have a bachelor's degree in computer science. I've been doing this a very long time. The idea for an application started on March 22nd. We launched the first version of ARRIVECAN April 29th. That is incredibly fast by private sector standards. It was secure, it was on multiple platforms, and it was successful, and it kept iterating. Even using any public servant, that nobody can do it that quickly. And this required skills that we did not have at the time.
Sir, I'm talking about the selection process here, not the way the app was programmed and how it was rolled out. Is it normal that in an agency that has hundreds of specialists that you would outsource that, and obviously they lined their pockets and they weren't even qualified to make those profitable decisions as to who would actually deliver the product? I'm talking about the middleman here. Do you think that that is normal? Yes, it's absolutely normal. If we had to go and look after all the individuals, whether it be in terms of cybersecurity or the cloud, it would be impossible to do that job, and we did it in a time frame of 6 weeks. So we use a middleman, they have the solutions, they'll do the screening, they have the CVs. If we had to do that ourselves, it would have taken between 6 and 8 months, and maybe that wouldn't have even been feasible. We need someone to point us in the right direction in short order. Had you had to make that decision, do you think that you would have awarded that contract to GC Strategies after all? Well, the buck stops with GC Strategy. I'm responsible for my decision, and I don't regret my decision in the first place.
Thank you, gentlemen. That is our time. Mr. Johns, 6 minutes, please.
Mr. Doan, I want to offer you an opportunity to clear your name. A government official has come to this committee and directly accused you of lying and threatening them. Other witnesses have indirectly accused you of lying or omission. Your name, as you even stated yourself, is all over the press. I'm sure your many years of work in the public service is important to you. So I want to offer you one more chance to tell the whole truth to this committee. And I'll offer you a chance to address the allegations made against you. But first, can you please address any statements you've made to this committee that you've reflected on and realized you misrepresented something or left something out, however small, however unintentional? I want to offer you a chance to address the allegations made against you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So, as I understand it, there are 3 allegations. The first one is I misled committee. I did not. When I answered about the emails, when I looked through the package that was received, I searched everything. I found nothing. For me, lying is knowing the truth and deliberately saying something else. The other allegation is that I picked GC Strategies. As you've heard many, many times already, I picked a technical direction. Nowhere in all the material that I've found or my recollection was that direction implied that it would be GC Strategies. So that is the other allegation. In terms of harassing and threatening, I've said in my opening statement, I welcome the opportunity to say it again. I was in no position to threaten Mr. Macdonald.
So you're saying that Mr. Macdonald was lying to this committee, that when he said that you selected GC Strategies?
Mr. Macdonald's interpretation I can't speak to. I did decide a certain direction that I ended up with them. And depending on how you see this, that could be seen as I implicitly decided on a company. I was explaining this to a neighbor of mine. And in the simplest terms for me was, I ask you, would you like to go to Europe or South America? You respond, Europe. And I say, well, you decided Paris. So that is, if that's the view of the reality, my decision at the time, I did not know that GC Strategies was involved in that strategic direction.
Okay, well, Mr. Macdonald says he had never heard of Bottler until November 19th, 2019, when he was approached with an unsolicited proposal. But we know from recorded conversations that Mr. Firth had been communicating with Bottler long before that, telling them that it was Macdonald who discovered Bottler and wanted their software to solve CBSA C65 needs. When were you aware Firth was communicating with Bottler on Macdonald's behalf? Were you aware at the time or after the fact?
I only learned these things recently in the news and in the allegations. I do have, in terms of material here, from Mr. Macdonald that says at least twice I found Bottler.
Okay, did the CBSA president task you, Macdonald, or anyone else with filling the CBSA's need in response to C65? What was the president's initiative on this?
Thank you for the question. We were being briefed at Executive Committee about the problems around sexual harassment. Every vice president would have been there, the deputy and the associate deputy. At the meeting, or perhaps thereafter, my memory is not clear, the president looked to me as chief information officer and says, is there a different way using technology to solve this problem? To which I said, I will look into it.
So Mr. Doan, the CBSA is now suspended all contracts with GC Strategies, Doan and Cordex. And my understanding is that they're still allowed to do business with other departments within government. And now you're the CTO. Do you not see a problem with this, that CBSA is not doing business with them right now, suspended all activities, and the RCMP are investigating, but yet they can still get contracts within government? It sounds absurd to me.
Merci pour la question. La décision de...
Thank you for the question. The decision to suspend based on the allegations, well, I'm not fully aware.
What led to that decision, or is not informed?
But wouldn't this concern you as the CTO, that you should be, looking at this and making a decision whether to recommend a government to suspend them from all government departments until this investigation is thoroughly looked at and the police have done their investigation?
As Chief Technology Officer at Treasury Board, I set technical direction for the government in terms of major IT, things like cloud use, cybersecurity, desktop, others. My role within the Office of the Chief Information Officer is not around procurement. Different deputy heads are delegated to make procurement decisions. From where I sit, I give direction and technology and ensure that the projects and major projects of different departments are aligned to the enterprise standards.
How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
45 seconds.
Okay, so in your understanding, there is nothing you can do now, given that you know that the CBSA has suspended activities with these companies. There's nothing you can do in your role as CTO.
My role within, I would offer that would be something that PSPC would have a more informed opinion on.
Well, don't they rely on the CTO to give them advice?
Actually, no, they do not.
So the CTO has no input at all if they see a company that is being accused of violations of getting further contracts with the federal government, with the government of Canada.
My role is around the technology direction. It is not from a values and access of companies, different parts of the organization, primarily PSPC.
Regardless of the values.
My
So
role,
the values don't matter.
My role as in terms of Chief Technology Officer is not to be involved in that type of procurement activity. There are different parts of the organization that does that. I set technical direction. I was not consulted on this decision.
Thank you, gentlemen. That is our time. Mr. Genuis, please go ahead.
Mr. Doan, from what I understand, there were initially 6 companies that were identified that could have built this app. Is that correct? And who were the 6 companies?
Thank you for the question. I'm not aware of who the 6 companies were. I know of the 3 of them. One of them was Apple, the second one was Deloitte, and the other one was a hybrid solution that would use most of our existing coding and technology.
And that so-called hybrid solution was the GC Strategies one?
That ultimately became the GC Strategies one. Yes, it was.
Okay. So, sir, it seems the core point of contention comes down to, well, one of the core points of contention comes down to who chose GC Strategies. $54 million went through this company. It's a 2-person company working out of their basement. No in-house IT expertise whatsoever. Did very well financially off this contract. So everybody wants to know who actually made the choice to hire GC Strategies, and anybody who might have been responsible for that decision is telling us that they weren't involved. You have testified that you did not choose this company. However, you've also testified that you were presented with 2 models of service delivery. One of those, you say, was fully outsourced, and the other one was partially outsourced. And so you made the choice without knowing which company was associated with which bid. You made the choice to choose the partially outsourced as opposed to the fully outsourced solution. Is that your testimony essentially?
I chose a direction, and it was partially outsourced as actually staff augmentation. If I could clarify one part, GC Strategies did not receive $54 million. So I've heard numbers here at 9 million or 11 million. They did not receive. Okay,
54 million went through. Was spent on ARRIVECAN, went through GC. But I want to just focus on the piece about the decision you made, right? So you were presented with a choice. between a fully outsourced option and a partially outsourced option, and you gave the direction, you made the decision to say you want the partially outsourced option. Is that correct?
Made that decision.
Pardon me?
I made the decision to go to a model that would use staff augmentation and our existing cloud and leverage existing code. I made that decision.
You made that decision, and you are telling us that you, at the time you made that decision, had no idea that there were specific companies associated with specific options. Like nobody mentioned that GC Strategies is presenting this option and Deloitte is presenting this option. You made that recommended technology direction in complete ignorance about which companies were behind which option. Is that what you're telling us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is not what I'm telling you. I would like to remind the committee that this was not a $54 million in March of 2020.
That's not my question, sir. That's not my question. Answer the question, and you have an obligation to answer the question. That's part of the way this process works.
I am answering the question.
No, you're not. You're telling me that you were not ignorant of which companies were involved. So when you were presented with these two options, a fully outsourced option and a not fully outsourced option, you're telling me you knew at the time that Deloitte was behind one of them and GC Strategies was behind the other?
GC Strategies behind the other, and all the evidence I found will support what I just said.
Pardon me, can you repeat that, please?
I am saying that I was aware that one of them was Deloitte, and I was not aware that the other one's GC Strategies, and all the evidence I found supporting this decision around that time will support what I said. There are no mentions of GC Strategies.
So someone came to you and they said, we have the option of fully outsourcing to Deloitte, or we have the option of a partial outsourcing solution, but we're not going to tell you who the company involved is, and then you made the decision. Is that how it happened?
So about 10 days before this started, the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic.
Sir, not what we're talking about. Not what we're talking about at all. Could you answer my question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an important context. 5 days later, Canada closed its borders. 4 days later, we unprecedentedly closed the borders with the United States.
So you're already accused of lying to this committee. Could you? I think it's in your interest to be forthright and direct, and you have an obligation to be forthright and direct in any event. Is my description of events correct? Namely, that when presented with this choice, you were given either fully outsourced to Deloitte or this partially outsourced solution in which they didn't tell you what the company was involved, and you made the decision in the absence of that information. Is that what you're claiming?
Very quick answer, Mr. Doan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The decision wasn't partially outsourced. It's staff augmentation, and it was to build an app to replace a form. That was all it was. It was not a $54 million decision. We didn't know that simple app.
So you're not answering my question.
That is our time, gentlemen.
Mr. Chair, I would ask you to call the witness to order on this point. He has an obligation to answer.
Yeah, but that is our time. Perhaps on your next round we can get to that. Thanks very much. Mr. Jouari, please, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, thank you for coming today. Mr. Doan, you were presented with an option of fully outsourced and as opposed to staff augmentation using existing cloud and existing code. Can you explain the existing code piece that you're talking about?
Thank you for the question. CBSA at the time had already an application called EDEC, which is short for e-declaration. So we had some basic understanding of mobile development. Now, I won't pretend e-declaration was anything near ARRIVECAN in terms of complexity. And part of the work that we were doing on our innovation, following a direction from Treasury Board, which is to start experimenting with cloud and do more things on cloud, given the different benefits and security that it brings.
Okay,
so,
thank you. So, existing code based on something you had, and I think that's the one that costs about $80,000 to start with. Am I?
The first version of ARRIVECAN to replace a simple paper form, yes, it costs $80,000.
Then subsequently about 6.9 to be able to implement all the 70 changes that came over the 2-year period.
In terms of, so this is where it becomes the 54, but that 54 million is misleading. Only a part of that number, to your point, was actually application development.
Okay. Now I want to go back and talk about your knowledge of the suppliers or who would provide those services, whether it would be Apple or Deloitte as part of an outsourced approach, or whether it would be a combination of an outsource, as you call it, under the staff augmentation. Where did the name Deloitte come?
Deloitte was contacted by, to my understanding, Mr. Macdonald, to very quickly come up with a quick proposal. And when I say quick, it was about 24 hours. The pandemic was there. We needed a solution quickly. So there was a proposal there. The proposal, I've also included in the material, is very, very rudimentary. It's basically mock-ups of what the screen could look like and then where it could eventually go.
So Deloitte was asked, and your claim is by Mr. Macdonald to put within 24 hours, put a proposal.
I don't know who contacted who first. At that time as CIO, I was getting approached by every single vendor, many of them, IBM, Accenture, others, to offer to help and deal with this global pandemic. So did Deloitte reach out to Mr. Macdonald? Mr. Macdonald reached out to Deloitte. This was happening so fast, I'm not sure anybody knows for sure.
There's a claim that you told Mr. Macdonald that go with G strategy as Deloitte is in penalty box due to a very large project being off track. Is this a true statement?
As I've said many times, I picked a direction. I did not pick GC strategies. I did not name them. I did not ask them for a proposal. In terms of Deloitte being in the penalty box, my decision on this was not about what they're doing with us on a different project. My concern was this. It was fully outsourced to a third party, and sensitive data wouldn't be on our cloud, it would be on their cloud. So the decision is the lack of flexibility, the lack of agility, which is why I preferred staff augmentation instead of a fully outsourced solution on something so mission critical.
So it is fair to say, and I'm trying to infer, is it fair to say that at no point you made any reference to Mr. Macdonald directly or indirectly about not extending the contract to Deloitte, or don't go with outsourced solution with Deloitte as Deloitte is in the penalty box for something? So that conversation never took place in your mind.
I don't recall using the term penalty box. I don't watch a lot of sports. That's not a term that would be very familiar with me. So in terms of extending the contract that we have with Deloitte, that would be another project that was led by another vice president. I would not have that decision.
I would take it that no, you did not have that conversation with Mr. Macdonald, specifically talking about penalty box and all of them. Okay, how often did you meet with Mr. Macdonald on ARRIVECAN?
In the early days, and you will see evidence of this, and when I say early days, I do mean days. It starts on the 22nd. You'll see emails on the 23rd. Emails start at 7 in the morning, and it ended at 11, and would start at 7 in the morning again. We would talk all the time.
Talk to Mr. Macdonald.
I'm afraid. Mr. Garand for 2.5 minutes.
I don't usually let liberals talk because they don't really say anything and they ask really softball questions. But there was some good answers that came out in that little string, even though the liberal didn't mean for those answers to come out. But I think they're curious as to what's going on too, and they're not asking the super hardball questions because they know that Trudeau's going to get hung for it. They're trying to kind of make it seem like it was procedure, and it really wasn't any wrongdoing. But we all know better than that. Anyway, back to the questioning. This is the Bloc Québécois guy.
You were the Chief Information Officer. You got up in the morning and you said, well, we need an application here. You made a decision and you said that it would be a hybrid solution rather than a fully outsourced solution. And as CIO, you made that decision, and then it went out of your office to procurement. They never got back in touch with you. There was no feedback whatsoever, and then that company was selected, and you basically learned it in the newspapers. That's basically our take on the matter. So what you're saying to us is, even though, well, you are responsible overall for procurement, but as CIO, your opinion is never solicited. when it comes to the companies that are either fit or not fit to respect the terms of a contract? Response. Well, to be clear, I didn't learn that we would be working with GC Strategies on the news. That's the first thing. My question is about procurement, sir. You take a strategic decision that leaves your office, and as CIO, you never hear about that decision. It's contracted out, and the buck stops with procurement. It's no longer your problem. But circumstantially, at least, it would suggest that Mr. Macdonald was aware. Given your position, you don't seem to have that much power based on what you're saying. Well, the management under my purview have delegated to, and they're all accountable to me. Mr. Doan, you've said since the start of proceedings that the circumstances were exceptional, that you had to proceed rapidly, that they were not normal circumstances, and then you justify what occurred thereafter by referring to those circumstances. But, you know, these were extraordinary circumstances, but this is not appropriate. The first version cost over $80 million, or $80,000 rather. I shouldn't have to be consulted about something that would be developed in a 4-week time frame that cost $80,000.
Faisait confiance à M. Macdonald. Il y avait des délégations.
I trusted Mr. Macdonald. The authority was delegated to him, and I'd like to remind the committee that ARRIVECAN was not my only responsibility. It was quite a simple app to replace some paperwork. There were many of my employees that had COVID, that were in hospital, so I had to delegate this, and yet I was accountable.
Our time. Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes, please.
So Mr. Doan, are you saying because you don't follow sports, you don't know what it means when a company's put in the penalty box?
Thank you for the question. Non, c'est pas ça que j'ai dit. J'ai dit, je suis...
That's not what I said. It's not an expression that I'm not aware of, but there's a big difference between an expression that I use myself often.
Okay, well, Deloitte, it was alluded to that they were in the penalty box. We can come up with whatever we want. Sideline, pushed out, on pause. Why? Why was Deloitte on pause?
The CBSA was in the middle of a major project, and if memory serves, it was over $400 million, but do not quote me on that, but it was in the neighborhood, to give you an idea, a major IT project to modernize its revenue collection. It was a managed service, and it was the system integrator was Deloitte. That major project had a lot of difficulties, and the difficulties around time, scope, cost. Now, to be fair, and with my 25 years of experience, all major projects in IT have difficulties. It doesn't matter which partner it is. It doesn't matter if it's outsourced or insourced. So the difficulties.
So why are they all not in the penalty box? Why is everybody else not in the penalty box? Why was Deloitte specifically in the penalty box?
For the question, again, I don't remember using the word penalty box. We were working with them on a major project. And from a major project perspective...
A $400 million project, you think you would have a really good idea what they were doing wrong. I mean, why were the cost overruns? Why was it taking too long? I mean, why? If you're punishing them, they've done something wrong. What did they do wrong?
I don't know who punished who. No, there was no punishment involved. These major projects, the problems are joint. In terms of, it could be around business requirements, it could be around changing scope, it could be because it's taken some time, the technology has evolved. So it's not necessarily one party, and usually in my experience, it's both parties that need to sort through it, negotiate it, and make change requests as well. So I don't know.
Typically, you don't punish or put a company in the penalty box, especially a company that size on a project that size, without something going on. I mean, this is really a big problem for this committee. We can't get straight answers from anyone, it seems, on the questions we're asking. And I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this, just some straight goods. Can you tell me anything that this committee should be aware of why Deloitte was in the penalty box or pushed out or whatever you want to come up with?
I'm afraid that is our time, but perhaps we can get back to it on your next round, Mr. Johns. Mr. Duncan, please, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Doan, at the beginning of my comments here, I just want to remind you of the swearing in and oath you took here this afternoon. and a witness who refuses to answer questions or fails to reply truthfully may give rise to a charge of contempt of the House. In many rounds now, we've been asking some basic questions and not getting answers. We've been getting skating around it. So I'm going to try again, building on what Mr. Jennis had said earlier. The word you're using very specifically is you picked a technical direction, but Mr. Jennis did ask you in a previous round, when you made the decision to go in-house with a hybrid model, can you confirm again that you were completely unaware in that hybrid model who those outsourced contracts may be? Yes or no? Did you know that GC Strategies or anyone was involved at that time?
Merci pour la question. Le témoignage puis
Thank you for the question. The evidence supports what I said. In no case did the hybrid option mention GC Strategies. Not at all. In no single document, in no single email is the word GC Strategies mentioned.
To go with a in-house model, a hybrid blend as you call it, and picked a technical decision, and you had no clue who would actually be working on the project. You're telling Canadians this is the case, that you made a decision worth tens of millions of dollars worth of sole source contracts that came down, and you just said, we'll do it in-house and doesn't matter who the outside contractors are. That wasn't even a thought for you in making a decision one way or the other that you might want to know who it is?
Thank you for the question. I've said it previously, but I will repeat. It was not a multi-million-dollar decision. It was not a $54 million decision. It was a decision to have one application up in 6 weeks to replace a piece of paper that cost $80,000. So I trusted my DGs who are delegated to do these things to get it done, and Mr. Macdonald got it done.
Well, I would say your decisions led to 4 sole source contracts going between April 2020 and May 2022, valued at $43.1 million. So I would argue your decisions did have some consequence. So I want to provide you the opportunity as well. You've been to the committee, and there's been many challenges with some of the testimony of what we've heard, to say the least. Many accusations have been made against you regarding you being the one that made the decision and aware of what was going on. But your wording today has picked a technical direction, and you reference other people on your team are the ones that made the final decision to go with GC Strategies, among others, and no names have been given. I want to provide you an opportunity again. If it wasn't you that made the decision, then name the name of who did it.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. I was the one who made the final decision. I'm responsible for it. The buck stops with me. The question that you're asking me is who contacted GC Strategies to ask them to solicit bids. There's a difference between those two things. Who made the call? I don't know. I still don't know. But based on what I've understood, this is under investigation by CBSA currently.
I go back again. So if it was not you, you've not gone through any of your research, any of the documents that you've asked and been given to. Everyone's pointing the fingers at you to say you're the one that made the decision. Your quote's only a technical direction, yet nobody in all the testimony that we're hearing this way is taking responsibility for what happened. So perhaps what I can just say is, who's going to take responsibility here? Do you take any responsibility for what happened here? You haven't provided the person through all the documentation notes you've been given and going through. You haven't pinpointed how tens of millions of dollars of sole source contracts got awarded over multiple years. And that whole starting point, just say, oh, I'm not sure who it was and it doesn't really matter to you. If it wasn't you, do you accept responsibility? And if not, who?
As the CIO, I take full responsibility on that decision to go in that direction. And that decision allowed us to deliver ARRIVECAN over 2.5 years. You mentioned it was a multi-million-dollar decision. It was not. We, at the time, did not know the pandemic would evolve the way it did. All the messages were, it will be over soon. We didn't know variants were coming. We didn't know vaccine certificates were coming. We didn't know about exempt travelers and everything that ARRIVECAN had to do. I made a decision. I stand behind it. It cost $54 million, and it was value for money. And as far as I'm concerned, it saved lives.
I think there's a lot of Canadians that would struggle to understand how at the beginning of all of this here, making a decision to go in-house and have a hybrid of having an outsourced blend and have multiple companies, so you just made a selection and just didn't happen to ask at any point whether to go outsource or to go in-house with the hybrid model of having consultants and other firms getting sole source contracts, and never bothered to cross your mind in making one recommendation or the other who might be the partners playing and delivering on things. I think Canadians are going to have a very difficult time believing that.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr.
So I don't know how everybody figures that this app saved so many lives. I just don't get that. How did it save lives? It was designed to for ease of traveling when you're coming back into the country. That's it. That's what it was designed for. So how did it save all these lives? The only thing it did, we know what it did. We saw Pearson Airport and the rooms full of luggage, the lineups full of people, like the length of the airport trying to get on flights. We saw all the lineups at customs. We saw all of that. So the only thing it did was clog things up and make things worse. So I don't know where he's getting off saying this. I'm going to skip the Liberal favorite ice cream questions and go right to the next Conservative here. Steve Johns is pretty good, and the Block guy has been pretty good too. So you can't fault them. At least they're asking real questions. And the Block guy seems kind of disgusted, like every other Canadian should be, because of this, right? He just said $54 million is a right on price tag for that. Yep, no problem. Got good value for your money when you're paying 2/3 or a third of the of whatever the contract is to the ghost contractor, Mr. Firth, which we'll find out in the next ARRIVECAN hearing. So, because this whole hearing was dedicated to this guy, Mihn Doan, to trying to see what's going on with him. And obviously he's denying everything, as we knew he would. And then they all have evidence against each other. So it's up to this committee to try and figure out who made the decisions and who's on the line for this, right? Ultimately, there's a minister involved here somewhere. We know that. We just have to figure out which minister it is. But we will, and so will they. So, we'll just keep going here. Let me cue that up.
So, Mr. Doan, I'm going to go back to my opening line of questioning to you, because I asked you on 2, possibly 3 occasions, and you didn't give me a straight answer. And my colleague, Mr. Duncan, reminded you about a refusal to answer questions. I'm not interested in your version of a particular question I put to you. I expect a direct response to a direct question. So you identified a number of areas that Mr. Macdonald has accused you of lying. And I'm asking now this very simple question, now a third, possibly a fourth time. Was Mr. Macdonald lying at committee when he said the decision to retain GC Strategies on the ARRIVECAN was yours and yours alone? That is a yes or a no, Mr. Doan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is not a yes or no question.
I'm asking for a yes or no, Mr. Doan.
Thank you, but that is not a yes or no question. I made a technical direction in terms of where to go.
Again, Mr. Doan, I'm not interested in your explanation. Why is it impossible for you? It was easy for Mr. Macdonald to accuse you of deliberately lying. Is this something that your lawyer has instructed you not to opine on or to comment? I'm asking you specifically, was Mr. Macdonald being truthful with respect to all the lies that he claims that you made when you testified, specifically that it was your decision to retain GC Strategies? It's a yes or a no. Are you incapable of answering a yes or a no?
I am under oath, so the words that come out of my mouth are going to be very, very specific because I am under oath. The question that was asked of me is who picked GC Strategies? I did not make the decision to go with GC Strategies. I picked a direction.
I'm going to stop you right there. You did not make the decision to go with GC Strategies. Mr. Macdonald claims that you did. So is he telling the truth or is he lying?
Thank you for the question. If his interpretation of that question is who picked the technical direction that led to it, then that is his interpretation.
He didn't use the words technical direction, and I'm glad you brought up technical direction, because why was it impossible for you to phrase how you were involved with GC Strategies when you last testified before committee. You went through all these mental gymnastics to try to make us believe, well, it wasn't my decision alone, it was my team, I had 1,600 employees. No one believes you, Mr. Doan. I wanted to give you a safe environment to finally come clean with the truth, and it appears you are incapable of doing it. Someone has to accept responsibility for giving $9 million taxpayer dollars to GC Strategies on the ARRIVECAN app. That is fact. That is reality. Mr. Firth from GC Strategies confirmed that. I'm asking you, are you accepting responsibility for that, or is Mr. Macdonald lying?
As I said many times, I take full responsibility for the technical direction that I took that led to GC Strategies.
I'm going to accept that as a yes. So he was telling the truth, that that decision was yours. It wasn't his. Now, he gave you he looked at 6 options before he presented Deloitte and GC Strategies. How incompetent can you be, sir, when you're unable to identify for committee the names of those 4 other companies? Why is that?
You will see in the evidence, this happened over 24 hours. So lots of things were...
1 hour. You're the chief technology officer. Why can't you identify the other 4 companies? We know Deloitte. We know they're in the penalty box. We know it's GC Strategies. Who are the other 4?
I was not involved in that period of time, at that level of time. I trusted Mr. Macdonald to do the work and do the assessment over a 24, 48-hour period of time.
Mr. Doan.
I was managing
Mr. Doan,
the border.
I'll stop you right there. Did it not raise red flags to you that he presents only 2 companies in all of Canada that are actually capable of doing delivery on this ARRIVECAN app? We know that Deloitte was out of the question. Mr. Macdonald knew that Deloitte was in the penalty box, didn't he? That was widely known at the CBSA.
Thank you for the question. He did not present 2 companies. He presented an option, and the other one was to outsource. He did not, at any point in time...
Sir, he claims that Deloitte was his preferred choice. Was he telling the truth, or was he lying?
I have found no evidence of that, and actually I have emails that would recommend using our cloud, using e-declaration from Mr. Macdonald.
I'll ask the question. He claims he presents to you 2 options, Deloitte and GC Strategies. And he says to you, as he testified at committee, that his preferred choice was Deloitte, and then you turn that down because you probably confirmed that Deloitte was in the penalty box, and you directed him to go with GC Strategies. Again, Mr. Doan, for the 5th, 6th, 7th time, who is lying? Are you misleading, or was Mr. Macdonald misleading when he said that decision, that direction was not his, but yours and yours alone?
Very brief answer, please.
There's an evaluation matrix in here developed by the CBSA that supports my decision and does not recommend the Deloitte approach. That was...
Thank you, Mr. Doan. Mr. Jouari, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Doan, was there at any time any concern raised by your superior about ARRIVECAN?
I'm not clear on what the concerns that you're alluding to.
Any concern about the cost, about the timeline, about responsiveness at any time? Any of your superiors who raised any concern?
No, not at all. We were having different releases pretty much every 30 days, responding to moving OICs and public health measures that are evolving every day, new variants, vaccine certificates, different types of workers. We were working around the clock, and we were delivering over and over and over a 2.5-year period.
Thank you. Mr. Macdonald, I recall Mr. Macdonald indicated that you had indicated that the superior or people above are not happy about ARRIVECAN. Can you recall any conversation that you may have had with Mr. Macdonald around your superior not being happy about ARRIVECAN?
Thank you for the question. No, puts on.
No, not at all. There were meetings held, there were committees struck, there were town hall meetings, deputy ministers, other deputy ministers congratulated us on the job we're doing. They knew that what we were doing over the extended period, the stress that people experienced, we were proud of what we did, as were our superiors throughout the entire length of the pandemic.
Thank you. Mr. Macdonald also claimed that he understood that you said somebody is not happy up there and they want a head, somebody's head. Do you recall any conversation you had with Mr. Macdonald around an individual as superior, whether the president of CBSA or anybody else, that not happy about and they want somebody's head?
Thank you for the question. I was not briefing the minister or the minister's office about this at this time or in the fall of last year. Nobody was looking for a proverbial head. The question that was raised last year was, why did it cost $54 million? Was it value for money? And one of the sub-questions that was making the media was, why among the 30 or more companies that we worked with to develop ARRIVECAN, why would one of the companies be relatively small? There was no allegations of wrongdoing. Nobody's looking for a head.
Yeah, thank you. Who raised that question? Who specifically raised that concern or question?
Nobody raised that question. Nobody raised that concern.
So no minister, not your superior, raised the question that there are there's media news and we want to get to a bottom of it?
I was not briefing the minister. We're still, and I continue to be very proud of the ARRIVECAN work. Like, GC Strategies was one among 30-something companies that we worked with to deliver this, and it was tireless over 2.5 years.
Was there ever a concern raised around the $54 million?
There were questions to make sure we could justify it and explain it because it was very popular.
Those questions?
The entire agency, everybody. But we defended those numbers. We defended those numbers.
Okay, so did at any time a minister or a representative of a minister reach out to you or to your department, directly or indirectly, to inquire about the cost of the application?
Not to me.
Okay. So you also do not recall having any conversation about wanting somebody's head, somebody up there wants somebody's head?
As I said last year, there were no allegations of wrongdoing. It was just, can we explain the 50?
Well, let's hold it here. They're getting paid $9 million and making $3 million. Like, there's something wrong with that. When they're not providing a service, when they're not doing anything, it's this guy's job to check on that. Like, buddy, you're so proud of your work. Well, yeah, okay. So are Canadians. But for $250,000, $300,000, not $54 million. God, this guy. Oh my good God.
And I still stand behind it.
With 30 seconds to go, if there is any allegation of misconduct and lying and intimidation, who would you directly raise that to? Who would be your superior?
Any issues at that time during that period would have been Mr. John Osowski.
And what role does the clerk of the Privy Council play as it relates to raising these concerns of allegation?
At my level, I don't interact directly with the clerk. Any interactions would be higher than me. So in terms of seriousness of allegation, I would raise what I think would be needing attention, and then I trust the deputy ministers would raise to the appropriate authorities after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Doan for 2.5, please.
Merci, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Doan, I'll tell you why I'm really not wanting really to believe you here. First, you said the situation was urgent, that you had to go through procedures that normally take a longer period of time, and you had to do this in a 24-hour to 48-hour time frame because everything was rushed. Now, there are normal procedures that over a period of weeks or months, and this took place over 24 to 48 hours. There were technical specs, there was reports, you delegated, and then there was contracting out. Now, it would strike me that in a time of crisis, when things are moving very quickly, that would be an adequate reason for the Chief Technology Officer to give an opinion and to be consulted on the matter before retaining a company. You're saying that you followed the rules as normal, but this was exceptional, so everything was done within a 24 to 48-hour period, and the subtext of that is that things were not done normally. What version should we be believing here of what you have to say? Thank you very much for the question. There were people dying across Canada. There were Canadians going to hospital. That's not what I'm asking, sir. I'm not asking who went to hospital, who didn't go to hospital. You said in the first instance that things were rushed through, they were rammed through over 48 hours, and that you had to take extraordinary means. And when we ask, were you consulted? You said, well, all the normal procedures were followed. So what you're telling me is that normally the normal procedure is to not consult you if things are to be done in a 24-hour to 48-hour period? Response. The procurement procedures were followed. PSPC was consulted throughout. There was governance concerns, technical considerations. It should have been better documented, but it was a time of crisis and there was a pandemic. So what you're saying is that in a time of crisis, you were the Chief Technology Officer and no one saw fit to consult you and determine which was the best company to retain. You were the top-ranked person and you should have no input into the decision at the end of the day? Response. Given all my responsibilities at the time, the closure of the border, I had to delegate this to my Director General, Mr. Macdonald. I placed my trust in Mr. Macdonald. I managed my entire team at the time. I had to manage the lockdown.
Mr. Grom. Mr. Johns for 2.5, please.
Can you, did GC Strategies and all of its resources who worked on CBSA projects have proper security clearances? Like, have they all received and signed completed security briefing and screening forms?
Thank you for the question. To the best of my knowledge, you cannot actually start work, and a lot of the contracting authority, procurement teams within CBSA would have verified all of those things before work could be started.
Okay, these ghost contractors and unnamed resources pose, as you know, a significant risk to our national security and the data and privacy of all Canadians. Now, Rhetoric Dutt and Amir Morov never signed an NDA or any other confidentiality agreement with the government, CBSA, or any of the pass-through contractors that were enlisted under. Is this normal practice, and is it permitted by procurement policies for the government to not require contractors and or consultants to sign NDAs?
Thank you for the question. I believe there are two parts to that question in terms of NDAs and subcontracting. The first part is the term ghost contracting. I must admit, in all my years, 25 years, that's not a term I'm familiar with, and it's not a term I've heard of in terms of ghost contracting. So if what you're referring to is subcontracting, the practice of subcontracting, I believe that has been explained many times. The Government of Canada deals with the contractor in question, the main contractor. The main contractor then has, following PSPC guidelines and rules, the ability to subcontract to whoever they need to get the work done. Those subcontractors and those engagements, the Crown of the government, in this case CBSA, are not privy to that, and the only one who would know that and could probably speak to your question would be PSPC.
Okay, so basically the subcontractors don't need to sign NDAs is what you're saying. and they can have access to private information and, data and privacy of Canadians without signing an NDA or any other confidentiality agreement. That's basically what you're saying.
Merci pour la question. Non, ce n'est pas ce que j'ai dit.
No, that's not what I said. All the subcontractors that work on a contract have to follow the same rules and meet the same security requirements, regardless what level those subcontractors are at. From a security standpoint, everything must need to be upheld.
Mr. Genuis, for 5, please.
Mr. Doan, in general, when did you first become aware of the existence of GC strategies?
I didn't become aware of the existence of GC strategies well into the pandemic.
So when?
I would have to go back into my records to confirm.
Okay, but you're saying well after the awarding of this contract?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I am.
Okay, so the time you're telling us that at the time this contract was awarded, you never heard of GC strategies, never heard of Christian Firth, never met, had no awareness of them whatsoever.
There are over 30 companies that worked with.
No, that's what you're telling us, right?
Thank you for the question. That is not what I'm telling you.
Hey, can you give me a direct answer, sir? Were you when did you become aware of GC strategies? You said it was after the awarding of this contract. You said that earlier, right?
Thank you for the question. I believe what I interpreted was, when was I aware that GC Strategies works on ARRIVECAN? That was well after the pandemic.
No. When were you first aware of GC strategies in general?
Thank you for the question. When I looked through my records, there was a meeting in 2018 where I was a board member of IT professionals, and they came and presented to that board a very generic set of services and offers that were there. It was a large group setting. I do not have the material still, but I can endeavor to find it.
Do you recall that meeting, though? Was that the first time you learned about the existence of GC strategies?
I have a meeting invite and notes that they were there presenting among probably others.
Do you recall that meeting?
I do not recall that meeting.
Okay. We know that GC strategies did work for CBSA prior to ARRIVECAN. When, in your recollection, did you first become aware of the existence of GC strategies?
So, thank you for the question. Other than them being a presenter at a board meeting, then after that, I know that GC strategies was on letterhead when the bottler demo was presented to us.
Okay. Sir, I think everyone on this committee would be familiar with the phrase, make it look like an accident. And that's starting to seem to be what this is sounding like. Nobody is going to admit, apparently, to choosing GC strategies, but all kinds of factors were lined up in such a way that made it seem like it was the only choice. You were at the center of this choice, apparently. You say that you chose between the fully outsourced option, which you knew was from Deloitte, and the staff augmented option, which you say at the time you didn't know who it was coming from. Who brought this choice to you initially? How was it presented to you? This technical choice you tell us about.
Materials here. They're essentially a bunch of emails that says, one is we're going to a Deloitte. There's a deck that is presumably from Deloitte with mock-ups and screens. There's a different deck that says this is the in-source option. The material is here. That second option that I talk about, there's no mention of GC strategies anywhere.
Okay, so you were presented with two options. One had Deloitte. One was presented as an in-source option, but it didn't have the name of the company involved. That's really weird, right? Did you think it was weird at the time? Did you say, hey, how come there's no mention of the company or companies involved?
Thank you for the question. These options were developed over 48 hours. There's a very real possibility that at that time, things were moving so quickly, nobody even knew what company would be required or type of staff augmentation. There are many companies out there that do this type of work. So the first is, let's land on a technical direction.
Okay, but you were presented with a fairly detailed deck explaining an in-source option, right?
Thank you for the question. The deck was not fairly detailed. It was developed in 48 hours. It was mostly mock-ups and screens of what the first version that cost $80,000 could potentially look like. You cannot do a fairly detailed deck in 48 hours.
But it had the mock-ups, it had the precise cost in it, and there was a company that was behind it, but that company wasn't presented in the deck. That's what happened, right?
Thank you for the question. There was no precise cost in this. As I said, it was developed in 48 hours. It is basically saying, in what direction do we want to go? Here are early screens of what replacing a paper form can look like. And at that time, I don't believe anybody had an idea.
But you were presented with,
That is our time, I'm afraid, Mr. Genuis. Mr. Sousa, go ahead, please. Our final round now, colleagues, we're a couple minutes ahead, so I'm just going to add 1 minute to each of the 6 interventions, starting with Mr. Brock. For 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to go back, Mr. Doan, to Mr. Macdonald's statements last time that he appeared at committee. We talked about a number of lies that he claims that you have made. And now specifically, I want to talk about the alleged threats. In your opening statement, he claims, well, Mr. Macdonald claims that he was directly threatened by you on more than one occasion. You claim that that didn't happen, that you did not threaten. So both versions of fact cannot be true at the same time. So I'll ask you again, is your version truthful, and was Mr. Macdonald lying to this committee about you threatening him with respect to the exposure of GC strategies? Yes or no?
Thank you for the question. My version is truthful. I had never threatened Mr. Macdonald. I said if we couldn't have come to an answer that the committee may turn to.
Well, I will, by extension, claim that Mr. Macdonald was lying to this committee. I know that you have an aversion to using that language, probably as a result of some legal advice, so I'm not going to push you on that, but clearly you claim now, under oath, that your version is actually accurate. Did you actually seek advice from him on your initial upcoming testimony at this particular committee? He claims that you were so nervous, you were emotional, and at times you were crying, and you were desperate to get some guidance from him, even though he had been removed from the CBSA for close to a year at this point. You wanted guidance on how to testify at OGO. Was that correct?
Merci pour la question. Ce que j'ai dit tantôt, c'est que j'ai jamais.
Thank you for the question. What I said is I never threatened Mr. Macdonald. I did say that I did not threaten him.
On how to testify at your first committee meeting, yes or no?
J'ai demandé à M. Macdonald.
I asked Mr. Macdonald, and it's in the material here, I asked him if he could help us clarify some facts considering what had happened at the agency in March 2020. He was closer to what had happened.
I have an actual copy of the email that Mr. Macdonald wrote on the 29th of October 2022 at 11:28 in the morning. It was sent directly to you. It was CC'd to Kelly Belanger. It was CC'd to Carol Sabarin, to Antonio Utano, and to a Josh Bird. This was the subject matter of the Globe and Mail story that broke on October the 4th, 2023. I'm not going to read to you, sir, the exact 7 pages of the email, but certain excerpts of that. So Mr. Macdonald says to you, you asked me for advice on the key question of why GC strategies, but I also think we are all grappling with who selected GC strategies, that he wrote in on the October 29th, 2022 email. So let me stop you right there. So at this point, despite you telling this committee about all of the information that you picked a technical direction, you were prepared, sir, to take the advice of Mr. Macdonald to claim ignorance that you weren't aware as to who directly chose GC Strategies, because you said that on 4 occasions in your previous testimony. You said it was part of my team, and you weren't able to identify with clarity that you are today, sir, with respect to the technical direction. So that concerns me. Mr. Macdonald's email contains several suggested answers for the executives. As an example, I will start by saying that I was not personally familiar with GC Strategies during the time in question, the document states, although it's unclear which executive would be expected to deliver that line. The email also predicts some of the questions they will be asked. If pressed, come on, we want some accountability here. Who decided? How did this company get a contract for almost $9 million? Who made money off of this? Who is getting rich off of taxpayer dollars, the document states, followed by a recommended response. Another question, Mr. Chair, I stand by my statement that I don't believe there was a single person, and I'm not actually aware of any rules being broken or wrongdoing. This is not how we operate at the CBSA. This exchange, this email with coaching on what to say and anticipated questions by committee is so disturbing on so many levels, sir. It's akin to obstructing justice. My former career as a Crown attorney would elicit a police investigation if this type of evidence came out with respect to a trial or a hearing. Parliament is a little different, but it's still disturbing to me, sir, on many, many levels that you sought coaching on specifically what to say and to not accept responsibility for GC Strategies. Have you been coached today, sir, on what to say and what not to say?
Thank you for the question. I have not been coached today on what to say. There's an email that documents what I actually requested of Mr. Macdonald, and I quote, leaning particularly on your time in the first year when all of this being stood up and the various moving parts, would appreciate your review, addition, and edits to any of this material in prep for the agency's appearance next week.
Thanks, Mr. Doan. Mr. Sousa, please, for 6.5 minutes, or for 3.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Doan, if we just recapitulate, you had a technical decision to make. So should we completely subcontract out, or should we have a hybrid model? Is that correct? Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairperson. Yes, you've understood correctly. Now, when you received the report, there was Deloitte that could have provided a fully outsourced solution, and then there was a second option, if I've understood correctly. Thank you for the question. Yes, you've understood correctly. Now, aside from confidentiality considerations, you said to the committee that Deloitte is a big multinational company and that by their very nature they're problematic and the product might not be delivered quickly. Is that correct? Yes, multinationals oftentimes, when it comes to huge projects, are a little bit slower. We do talk to companies like Deloitte for apps that cost $80,000, for example. I've understood. So you say that Deloitte was one solution, but that you didn't even know what the other company was. The size of the company plays a role, as you just admitted. So in light of that, why weren't you seeking input or information? If it's so important, even though it's not in the report, how is it that you didn't ask any questions? How is it that the nature of the company is important for option 1, but when it comes to option 2, the size of the company is no longer important? Thank you for the question. Well, the way you formulated the question is there were 2 companies. Well, no, there were 2 options, and you only knew which company was for one option. My question is, why weren't you concerned about the size of the company in the case of the second option? My question was very specific. It's not how you just characterized it, and I'm expecting an answer to that question. Thank you for the question. There was no company associated directly with the second option, and I don't think one necessarily asks about the size of a company.
PSPC. So in our decision making around this, I am not of the habit to ask of the hundreds of companies and vendors how big are each an individual company. I asked for a specific technical direction, and that technical direction, at the time, there was no association to any specific company.
La nature, la taille de l'entreprise.
So the size of the company was an issue for the fully outsourced option, but when it comes to the second option, it didn't cross your mind, it wasn't important, it's not your way of doing things when it comes to the second option. You can understand why this strikes us as unusual. And ultimately, the contract was awarded to two individuals working from their basement. So my question is, why didn't you ask any questions when that report was issued? You're entitled to ask questions about the nature of the company that would be going after resources. Why didn't you ask any questions? Response: I don't know how many employees work for Deloitte. I know it's a multinational company. So it's not how many employees. Why didn't you ask the question in the case of the second option, i.e. the nature of the company? It strikes me as quite normal. There was no company associated with the second option.
And run Mr. Johns for 3.5, please.
Sorry, so you said, can you tell me again what you think GC Strategies made after costs?
Thank you for the question. I gave you my quick math depending on rates. We are not privy to the rates that these companies charge.
What's the amount you just quoted earlier in this committee that you said that you think that they made on their $11 million contracts with ARRIVECAN?
Thank you for the question. So watching these appearances, I did hear them say that their typical rates are between 15 and 30%. So I did math of 15 to 30% of $11 million. That is not a factual statement of mine. That is what I heard them say. I do not know what rates they charge, and their rates change depending on which subcontractor they deal with. To my knowledge, to be corrected, only PSPC would know that information. We do not know that information.
But say it's 20% on 11 million. That's a couple $1 million. They've done $55 million with Canada as a whole outside of ARRIVECAN in total. This is, a $10 million reward for two individuals over a couple of years. Do you see anything wrong with that, given that they don't have an office or any staff? You said that, we understand it's value for money, that their job is to do screening, vetting, to connect people. I mean, they altered resumes. They fraudulently changed resumes. That's how the screening went. In terms of vetting, I mean, no one signed any security briefing or screening forms. There was no NDA that was ever signed or a confidentiality agreement. I mean, this sounds like a disaster in terms of value for money. Would you not agree that there should be some changes?
Thank you for the question. The allegations around CV changing, I'm not part of any of those investigations, and I can't speak to that. In terms of the subcontracting model, this exists everywhere. This exists in the private sector, in the construction business or others. So this is a model.
Well, it shouldn't exist in the federal government. So $10 million, do you not believe that you could hire a firm for $10 million or actually employees within the department, $10 million, hire two individuals that could do this kind of work?
For ARRIVECAN, we needed access very quickly, as I've said, to many different types of skills, cybersecurity and others that we didn't necessarily have.
I'm just asking you, do you think you could hire someone with those kind of skills with that kind of money?
The government of Canada is working very actively to increase our IT skills and resources, but we're in very, very hard competition with the private sector who offer much more generous compensation packages for skills like cloud, artificial intelligence, and others. The other reality is it takes a long time to hire somebody from the outside with the government. So a long process.
Not for that kind of money. So Ms. Dutt sent an email, the second email, with allegations of misconduct in December of 2021. Bottler's project was terminated the very next day. I have to say the timing of this stinks of reprisal, especially since just a couple weeks earlier, CBSA was telling Bottler they were assigning new resources to aid the project. So what changed? Why was Bottler's project terminated? And I asked PSPC this question, but they couldn't answer. If you can't, then I'd like CBSA to answer this in writing.
From what I've heard of these committee appearances, there were no allegations in 2021 raised by Bottler. Mr. Utano spoke to this. There was a contracting dispute. PSPC was engaged, and the issue was resolved, from what I understand, fairly quickly. The allegations of wrongdoing from Bottler surfaced in November of 2022.
Resolved, they were turfed.
That is our time, I'm afraid. Mr. Genuis for 6 minutes, please, and then we'll finish with Mr. Jouari for 6.
During his testimony 1 week ago, Mr. Macdonald said the following, quote, I believe Mr. Mendocino was not happy. Mr. Mendocino wasn't there when ARRIVECAN kicked off and when all of this was going on, but there was a lot of news about ARRIVECAN. Mihn was worried that either he or Jonathan Moore were going to get fired. So he was talking about somebody's head on a platter. And he said because Jonathan Moore had made a whole bunch of mistakes from an accounting perspective, talking about how much ARRIVECAN cost, it would go his way or it could go Mr. Doan's way because Mr. Doan was the CIO at the time. Then he turned. We were on the phone, but he stopped the conversation and he just said, you know, Cam, if I have to, I'm going to tell the committee that it was you. End of quote. Mr. Doan, in that section of his testimony, was Mr. Macdonald telling the truth?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. I didn't brief Minister Mendocino on this issue. As I said, last year, there were no allegations.
I'm going to jump in there. I asked you a very simple question, and we've had you for almost 2 hours, and you've struggled to give direct answers to simple questions. And I'm not going to go off this one. In that section of his testimony, was Mr. Macdonald being truthful, yes or no?
Thank you for the question. I am under oath, so yes, I am being very careful about my statements because I'm under oath. I understand what.
But you still have an obligation to answer questions before a parliamentary committee. You have an obligation to answer those questions, sir, and not doing so is contempt of Parliament. Again, were Mr. Macdonald's statements truthful, yes or no?
Thank you for the question. I am trying to answer the question. So there are different elements of that quote that you read to me that in terms of what is truthful, in terms of what is engaging.
Were some elements of that quote untruthful then?
Last year, nobody was looking.
Are there
to
any
fire
elements
anybody.
of that quote, sir, that are not accurate?
I can get that in writing. Can you repeat the quote for me?
Sir, the quotation, I have limited time, and the quotation was directly from Mr. Macdonald's testimony. You heard it. Was
Mr. Generous, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Please repeat the quote. I will allow the extra time. And Mr. Doan, I'm going to just read from you, right from witnesses, for swearing of witnesses, procedure and practice. It states, refusal to answer questions or failure to reply may result in a charge of contempt. This has been repeated to you several times today. There have been a lot of direct questions, and I normally don't do this, but there have been very specific questions, and we'd like very specific answers. Taxpayers deserve that. Canadians deserve that. Parliament deserves that. Mr. Jones, I'm going to turn it back over to you if you want to repeat the quote, and I will not take away your time.
Thank you, Chair. The quote is as follows. I believe Mr. Mendocino was not happy. Mr. Mendocino wasn't there when ARRIVECAN kicked off and when all of this was going on, but there was a lot of news about ARRIVECAN. Mihn was worried that either he or Jonathan Moore were going to get fired. So he was talking about somebody's head on a platter. And he said because Jonathan Moore had made a whole bunch of mistakes from an accounting perspective, talking about how much ARRIVECAN cost, it would go his way or it could go Mr. Doan's way because Mr. Doan was the CIO at the time. Then he turned. We were on the phone, but he stopped the conversation and he just said, you know, Cam, if I have to, I'm going to tell the committee that it was you. End of quote. In that section of his testimony, sir, was Mr. Macdonald being fully truthful? Yes or no?
Thank you for the question. No.
Which parts of that quotation are not true from your perspective?
So I've written them in order. So the first one, Mendocino not happy. I would not know that. I would not be privy to that. So I don't know where Mr. Macdonald got that. I'm not saying that it came from me. It did not come from me. I was not briefing the minister or the minister's office. Number two, I was. You asked.
Let's jump in on that point specifically. So you're saying that you didn't have a direct conversation with Mr. Mendocino, but did somebody else tell you that Mr. Mendocino wasn't happy, and did you relay that information to Mr. Macdonald? Because all he said is that you said it. Did you in fact say what he says you said?
I do not recall saying that Mr. Mendocino or any related information would have come to me. And at that time, that was not the concern. Can I answer number 2 and 3?
Do you recall at any point, do you recall being told at any point that Minister Mendocino was not happy?
Thank you for the question. No, I do not recall that. Can I answer 2 and 3?
Could you go on with the other errors in his statement that you believe were made?
Number 2, either I or the CFO would be fired. I had no fear for my job this time last year. I stand behind the decision. I think it's value for money, and I don't think at any point in time I was afraid for my job. I don't think a public servant doing their job, delivering on something like ARRIVECAN, would be fired.
Okay.
And
did you at any point tell Mr. Macdonald that you would tell the committee that it was him who made the decision?
Thank you for that. I did not threaten to blame him, and I was here a week or two. I was here on October 24th, and I had an opportunity to do so with all the allegations around his name, and I still did not do so.
So you're suggesting that this conversation between you and Mr. Macdonald is entirely fabricated?
Thank you for the question. I did have a conversation with Mr. Macdonald. I did reach out to him. There's evidence of this. I reached out and asked him for facts and data because he was there at the time. I did have the conversation. The point of the conversation was help us understand who invited GC Strategies in to ARRIVECAN at the first time. We absolutely did have a conversation.
Okay, but these various particular points you're saying are not accurate. With respect to the minister's office, did you have any information shared with you about the perspective of the minister or the minister's office in relation to this procurement?
Thank you for the question. I do not recall anything from that perspective, or from the minister's office, or from the minister, and I was not briefing the minister on this topic.
Did you receive any direction along these lines regarding Deloitte, regarding the selection, regarding how people felt about it from Mr. Osowski, Ms. O'Gorman at any points?
I do not recall getting any direction on any of these matters. In terms of technical direction, this would not be something that a deputy minister would normally get involved in.
Okay, so to summarize your testimony, you were given two options. You knew that Deloitte was behind one of the options. You did not know that GC Strategies was behind the other. You chose the option for the company that involved a company that you weren't aware of. You don't know who made the decision regarding GC Strategies. You at no point heard from or consulted with your bosses within the department. And Mr. Macdonald fully fabricated significant aspects of your conversation with him. I find that testimony quite unbelievable, frankly. But that's what you have to say?
Yes. And that is our time, Mr. Genuis. Perhaps Mr. Doan, you can get back to us in writing on that. Mr. Joar.
Well, there you have it, folks. There's I'm not gonna put up the Liberal again. This guy just doesn't. What kind of ice cream do you like? Questions. So that's the end of the real questions. This guy's saying that this Cameron Macdonald guy didn't lie or lied, and Cameron Macdonald's saying he lied. Basically, what he's saying is that I knew that it was two firms. I knew that Deloitte was one of them. And then the other one, he didn't know who they were. So he's saying that Cameron Macdonald made the decision on GC Strategies. Whether he's saying it straight out or whether he's not saying it, he's saying that Cameron Macdonald made the decision on GC Strategies. That's what he's saying. So, but anyway, you heard all the testimony. You can be the judge as always. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll see you in the next video.